We are MakilalaTV, the first Filipino-American TV talk show in the New York metro area. Get to know us as we talk to the community leaders, innovators, advocates, and emerging artists who affect Filipino-American life.
Darna is the first and only Filipino superhero that I know of. She is a Filipino cultural icon that was created back in 1950. Who are the other Filipino comic writers, artists, and graphic designers that have kept their roots encapsulated in their work? With the power of social media, we are now hearing of more stories and work like the Pixar artist Bobby Rubio, who recently announced an upcoming short for Pixar Animation Studios to feature 2 Filipino-American characters, and a comic book with a Filipino-American superhero who uses eskrima, the national sport and martial art of the Philippines, also known as arnis. I, Rachelle Ocampo, am joined with my co-hosts Jen Fuhrer and Cristina Pastor to dive deeper into this comic book world. First, we have Ramon Gil, who is a comic book writer and a publisher of Story Arc Media and founder and organizer of Diversity Comic Con. Ramon has written for Dynamite Entertainment, Bleeding Cool, The Beat, Source Point Press, and more. He is the creator of The Men from DARPA, The Hard Code, Truer Than Trousdale, Centuries, and the Sci-Fi's Anthology. All his stories feature Filipino or Asian lead characters. We are also happy to have Miss Maria Paz Cabardo, a graphic designer, art director, book publisher, film director-producer, and fashion designer. Maria is a creative professional who has worked in multiple industries, such as comics like DC Comics and Marvel, which I feel like that we've heard of before, publishing like Penguin and Quarto, computer gaming, role-playing, and advertising. She made an award-winning documentary film about comic book legend Jeffrey Catherine Jones called Better Things, and is currently developing her own travel fashion line called Form and Function. So my first question to you, Ramon, is why do you think representation is important in your field?
Well, I think representation is important in any field. But more so with comic books, because for decades now, there have been many Filipinos who have been creators, primarily artists, but they are behind the scenes, but they're not on the pages. So you have Filipinos, really good Filipinos, Nestor Redondo, Tony De Zuniga, Rudy Nebres, since the 70s, who have been producing American comics, but you hardly ever see Filipinos on the comic book pages themselves. So that's why I think it's important.
So you're saying that there should be more Filipino characters?
Yes.
So you've created this, what is it, Diversity Comic Con?
Diversity Comic Con.
Is that something different, or is that in line with what you're
It's
also
in line
trying
with
to go?
things that I've always been an advocate of diversity, especially Asian American awareness or awareness of Asian American issues. And so Diversity Comic Con was a way for me to combine my love for comic books and my personal mission of raising awareness for the Asian American community.
Just to follow through on Rachelle's question, so there are lots of us behind the scenes. So why is there no Filipino comic hero, no Filipino superhero?
Well,
Other than Darna, because she's the only one I know.
well, there are lots of Filipino superheroes in the Philippines.
In the Philippines, yeah.
In the U.S., I think it's just because the audience, they have always been perceived to be Caucasian males, and so you don't really see, there hasn't been until recently a push for more diversity in the medium. Nowadays, if you were to go to a typical Comic-Con, you will see a lot more diversity in the books. But that's a fairly new thing.
I think it's just a new thing now that we're open, we're more diverse, more multicultural.
Well, it took a while for Black Panther to actually make it to the big screen. So
And that was a big hit.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
That was like a big that just shows you how far away we are still from, from representation and all that
That's
type of
right.
stuff.
That's true.
But we are the creators, that makes you wonder.
Well,
we are the people who
there's
make
a lot
it.
of people. Well, it's just the business, I think, the business model, where most of the time, people who create are not really the ones who are credited on the forefront. And it's been an ongoing thing. Well, primarily, another reason could be a lot of the creators. I mean, it's not just a job for them; it's also work. So it's not just work; it's something that they love to do. So they really don't push hard as well for credits or sometimes even money, which is probably not a good thing. But I think lately, because of the successes of a lot of different movies, books, and all that stuff, I think the trend now is for people to be a lot more credited and represented by, but by their works.
And well compensated at the same time.
Oh yeah, which is very important. Yes.
Another factor I think is technology. Back in the 70s and 80s, the only people who could publish comic books are publishers. Nowadays, with print on demand and the internet, anybody can publish anything. So back then, the publishers had control over what content went out. Nowadays, anybody who can draw and write can publish a comic book, and so I think that's why you see more diversity now.
I think it's also because of the audience.
Yes.
Back then, there weren't that much immigrants who would watch, I guess, diverse characters, as opposed to now that, the U.S. has become like more diverse than it was 30 years ago.
Right, and also because of the online opportunities, people hear more about different cultures and different countries and different stories. So after a while, when you get tired of the same old, then you're like, oh wow, there's actually comic books and comic book heroes coming from Asia. So I think, that's worth a try or a look.
Why do you think are Filipinos excelling in this industry?
Or are they?
Oh, they are. They
But
are.
how? I mean, the only other person that I think of is who's that? Ronnie
Del Carmen.
Carmen, yeah, who did a
Who
couple.
is my
Who's your
cousin by
No
acclamation?
way.
No, we're not related.
I was gonna say, like, is that what
we
DC
just met
said?
at a party. We realized that we both have the same name, and we declared right then and then we are now
You're
cousins.
related.
Oh,
But we're
yes,
not related.
of course.
And he's
Comic-
very good. Yeah.
Comics are actually very big in Asia, but I think the Philippines had a little bit of a head start because of the American occupation. So a lot
Tell
of
us about
comic
that.
books.
Like, how does that influence?
Comic
Yeah.
books were a very cheap way to entertain the soldiers during World War II.
Okay.
That's when Captain America came out and Superman. Those were the heydays. That's when
Yeah.
they first got really popular. And they were an easy way to entertain the soldiers. You didn't have to bring a projector or anything. Just send them these magazines, these comic books. And I think that filtered down to the Filipinos. And so since then, the Philippines had a very thriving comic book industry from ever since World War II. The rest of Asia also have it, but I think it really got its start in the Philippines.
I remember growing up a long time ago. As a kid, they had these comics
Yeah.
in the Philippines, and not necessarily superheroes.
Yes,
And like a story, a love story, and
a lot of like telenovelas.
yeah,
Right, but in comic
and,
book
and
form.
it's quick. It's a quick read, and
And
they have those
they
little
would be
pictures
published
and
in
colorful.
magazines like Liwayway.
Yeah.
Liwayway
Bulalakaw.
magazine, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had
Yeah, but they have
Bulalakaw.
like the really small ones,
Yeah.
like the little
Yeah,
pocket
that's right.
comic book.
And they were like 2 colors, and they were on really cheap paper.
Yeah.
But how
And
has it transformed now in the American mainstream that it's now a bigger deal that we have this Eskrima superhero? I mean, why did it take this long? So you're saying that it started from the war. How did we even get it in the Philippines?
What do you mean by
Like
how-
you're saying that like did the war bring
Yeah, so I think the
comics?
American soldiers exposed the Filipinos to the
the
American
comic.
comic books.
Yeah.
And the Philippines are very good at adapting things, whether it's music or TV or film or comic books. And we started making our own, and there were entire generations of really good comic book artists. So good that DC Comics back in the 70s went to the Philippines and recruited a bunch of artists and brought them to New York to work here for less money, but these guys,
opportunity.
but these guys really made a mark on the American comic book industry. And unfortunately, people outside of comics aren't really aware
No.
of them as much as they
I
should be.
feel like that it's like a whole new world for me to
Mhm.
understand this comic book, I guess, universe. Well, talking about opportunity, Maria, how did you get into DC Comics? Like, what was your history with them?
I actually used to work in role-playing games. That's usually where I worked a lot in that industry. And I used to go to all these comic book conventions because I would hire artists, illustrators for projects. So I would go to UCAC, which was in London. I would go to San Diego Comic-Con back then, which was it was still the big, now it's still the biggest comic book convention. And along the way, I would meet other people from other companies, and I've met people from DC, and one of them was Karen Berger. And so every time I go to a convention, she was there, especially in London, so we sort of became kind of convention, hello, hi, friends. And then at one point, I went to New York, and I said, okay, this is probably the place that I want to move to. And so I sent my resume to Karen Berger at DC Comics, and then she hired me.
Wow.
So, well, she didn't hire me, but she told somebody else in the company. She
referred you.
recommended me.
Yeah.
She
How
hired
did
you
you-
as an illustrator?
No, I'm actually an art director.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I make the actual books. I put them together. So I get everything ends in the art department, the production department. So the writing, the lettering, the art, everything else, it all goes into production, and then you have the book.
Maria,
What
what
was
do you mean by
your-
role playing? I was
There's
caught by
another
that term, yeah.
industry. It's
What does
the
that
role-playing
mean?
games where people pretend to be different characters, and then they have rules. They create a world. They have characters, and then they live this character as a game.
Oh, it's a
And
gaming. It's a
It's
gaming. thing.
yes, it's like
Oh.
computer games, but in paper, in reading. So they actually wear costumes, and there's actually a very, very big convention that I just went that I would go to. It's called Gen Con. That's a role-playing game convention. So there's a lot of them. It's a different entertainment.
And
What
my
was
my
your
children are
first-
into that. Yeah.
Role playing.
Yeah.
Wow.
What was both of you? What was your first like major masterpiece that made you like, oh, that's it. This is the career I want to go into. Like the first thing that you created, comics or
I've always, because I'm on the art end, so I don't really write, but I've always done art since I was a child, and I've always, I guess I could consider myself very lucky that everything if it's making things and doing anything creative, I'm always doing that. So I've always loved everything I've done. Like, I mean, very lucky I'm in an industry that's very creative driven. So there's and being in the art department, it's very rare that people kind of tell us what to do. We usually tell them what to do.
So what was your first collection? Like you say, you designed a whole. Was it a book? Was it a magazine?
I did
or-
a very big. I would think a very big collection. It was a new product called Underground for Mayfair Games back in Chicago a while back. So it's their biggest product. It's their first big major role-playing game back then. So I art directed that one. So I would think that was it. But it's very underground. Underground's very underground.
And then Ramon, how about you?
Well, this was my very first comic book, and all the creators on this are Filipino. So the cover was done by Rudy Nebres, who was very famous back in the 70s.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it was also done Luis Antonio Len Peralta, Gilbert Monsanto. These are all Filipinos. So this is an all Filipino comic book, my very first one.
Was that intentional to make sure that everyone involved was Filipino? Or did it just happen that you're all best friends and you're all Filipino and you all...
I think it was, at the time I did this, because I also had the design company at the time, and all my outsourcing I was doing it to the Philippines. So I'm not sure if it was intentional, but it was just natural for me to hire people in the Philippines. Not all of them are in the Philippines, some of them are here, but it was just very natural for me to reach out to artists in the Philippines for my book.
What is the reception to your comic book?
You mean how did people like it? Pretty good. We have some good reviews on Amazon. I've had several I've had several people, if you go to my website, you can see all these press reviews, all these links from people in the industry. One reviewer called me an artist on the verge of greatness. But that was 3 years ago. I don't know what happened to the verge.
It's still on the verge.
It's still on the verge. So.
I have to ask you both, why do we need superheroes? What is the motivation for that? Why?
Well, actually, I think superheroes, mostly young people are into superheroes. And I think the superheroes are inspirational. They are the mythology of today, of the young people today. Whereas old generations had legends and myths to inspire them, and classical stories and things like that. And I think today superheroes serve that purpose for the newer generations. Mm-hmm. They tend to be heroic. They tend to be, noble and
some kind
brave.
of role models.
Yeah. So.
Kind of entertaining too, though. You could do things
it's
that you
sort of like
could
a
you
part
cannot do.
think of.
It's part of entertainment. It's like a
Mhm.
certain form of entertainment as well,
Mm-hmm.
I would think.
So what is one thing that you are proud of from piece of work that you've been doing? I know you mentioned Vertigo.
Yeah, well, one of my roles as art director back at DC Comics when I was working there was I was art director for Vertigo, which was the graphic novel division of DC Comics under Karen Berger. I would do the covers and also the ads, the supporting materials for Vertigo at that time.
I actually led you into answering that question of what you're proud of. If that's not what you're proud of, but
I don't know.
What is your most proud?
I don't know if there's anything that I'm actually, because for me it's like all work. It's like it's like you start with one, you're actually having a great time. You're putting all your stuff, you're the best work as much as you can in it, and then it's done, and then you got to do another one. So it's really very hard to, especially with me, because I do a lot of different things, So I mean, you try to start something new, you give it the best you can. Like when I was doing, let's say, role-playing games. So, how did you get to be at your best? I would think that, well, maybe I was good enough that DC Comics noticed me and hired me.
Yeah.
Or if I'm at DC Comics, then okay, so what was your best one there? Well, I guess I tried to do my best at doing what I did, so that other companies, there's another company that hired me to do a comic book for them.
What about for Maria? What is it about Maria creation?
Oh,
In anything, in the comics, like that you think this is I want people to remember me.
oh, to remember me?
Something to be proud of. So
Something to be proud. Well, oh my goodness.
What about
That's a
your
really
new
hard
thing? MN
new
function?
thing.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm
The
doing a
travel
travel line
bag,
right
yeah.
now because I guess I jumped into another industry. I love doing things I've never done before.
So creative, though.
Yes, but people don't. After you've done one thing, it's all the same process. It's all the same process. You have your deadlines, you have your production, you have your to-do list, you have to hire people who will help you, who are good at what they do, and then you have your launch date, your final deadline, and you have your budget, and you have all that. So you just have to actually do it all the way to the end.
Starts with one idea.
It starts with a lot of there's
A
no
lot of
such
ideas.
thing
It's
as
a
a one
one
idea.
idea,
The
okay.
problem is how to make that millions of ideas turn into one, because that's the one you need for it to become a reality.
So can you show us
Oh,
your
yeah.
travel line? How does this work? Because it's not just a bag. Can you
Yeah,
show
no,
us?
yeah, because the concept here is I used to travel a lot when I was looking for artists, and I was working for the different publishers, and I would travel like crazy, and I needed certain things that I couldn't find anywhere to make my travel efficient. And so I said, well, I'll design my own travel line. I figured if nobody will buy it, at least I have all the samples and I can use them in my travels. So one of them is I call it the accent bag. This is like sort of like your to go out, have fun bag, because sometimes when you travel, you usually bring the practical bags.
So show us how it works, because
Yeah, it's you put it in. It's you can disassemble it so that you can actually fold it and pack
It's
it.
easier to pack.
Oh my god.
So you can pack.
You're breaking it.
Yeah, no. so you can, so it becomes like you can fold it and throw it in your suitcase and not worry about the leather being
Wow.
creased or
Yeah.
to occupy too much space or to weigh too much. Because sometimes we bring so many bags, you know, and
Yes,
usually
yes.
it's this size
fit,
bag
right.
that's annoying to bring. So you're like, oh, okay, you know, I'm just gonna bring a smaller bag.
So
Yeah,
practical.
so yeah, it's all made of leather. It's made of Brazilian leather and it's made here in the USA.
So you were traveling one time and said, okay, I need this kind of bag, and there's nothing is out
Right,
there, and
right. I
created
just
it.
wanted to put all the efficient things that I've collected while I was traveling, and I said, okay, I want to do my own version of them and then put it in one place. So people who need help when they travel and they want to travel light, they can come to my website and say, oh, okay, I have that scarf that turns into a cardigan. You
And,
know?
Oh, wow.
And Ramon, what is your most proud moment or piece?
Oh, most proud moment. I guess it would be the Diversity Comic Con. I teach at FIT, and it was so it's sort of like, aside from comic books and the diversity thing, it has also had a very educational component. So that combines a lot of the things I'm very passionate about, which is education, telling stories, and diversity.
How many students attend the Diversity Comic Con?
We had about 400 people, and we had about 47 exhibitors.
Oh, wow.
I think we had 8 panel discussions.
That's nice.
So it was very, very well attended, and we got a lot of good press. But as a Filipino creator, I think you have the screenshot of the. I did the story. My parents once told me that they use foreign farm animals to impregnate the other animals in their farm.
What?
So I made a.
That's a storyline?
How did this?
No,
That's a
it's
story.
a true thing. It's a true thing. The Philippine Department of Agriculture lends out foreign bulls and things like that
For breeding
And
for
purposes.
breeding, because the animals get bigger.
And then,
Oh.
And so I wrote a
made a
whole
story?
comic book story about,
About that.
discrimination among farm animals.
Yes.
You know,
I
and
think
that's
I
what
saw this
that's
on your website.
yeah. So that's as a Filipino, that's one of the stories that I'm most proud of, because I mean it's all tongue in cheek. It's all satire. It's about the son going back and being really offended that his parents are using foreign bulls to impregnate the local Filipino
Meaning
female
what, the locals
animals.
aren't good
are
enough
there
or
are there a
something?
lot of women in the comic book industry?
Now, yes, but back when I was in it, not so
not
much.
a lot. What are their roles? What do they do generally?
A lot of them are illustrators.
Illustrators. Okay.
A lot of them are editors. A lot of them are writers, artists as well. So there's a lot of them who are. It seems like there is more women now in the type of industry that was
Are
not.
they are creatives now paid better than before when you were probably just starting?
It all depends, because it all depends on the company you're working for, what their budgets are, because there's a lot of small startup companies in comics that don't have the budget but would love the work. So and there are bigger companies. In my film, I interviewed one of the bigger supposedly comic book artists on the planet. His name is Jean Giraud. He is known as Mobius. And he said something about, I mean, at his caliber and at his standing as a well-renowned artist, a big company was still trying to, stiff him over a bunch of stuff. Yeah. And this is also a very known company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was doing a film for them, and they replaced his original artwork with photocopies.
Oh
my
my
God.
gosh.
Yeah. So that was,
Does a comic hero have to be made into a film to become really, really popular?
It helps.
Is it part of the
I mean,
package
because
that
it helps
you have to
because
have a comic and then a film?
It does
part
help
of it?
because the marketing and the outlet to reach audiences for a film is much bigger than a comic book. So if your comic book gets turned into a film, then it becomes much more bigger, because there's a lot of films that the comic books are not very popular,
That's right.
So,
but they became popular movies. Yeah.
so I know that we are running out of time. we do have to begin closing the episode. So I would like to spend the last minute to ask you one last question. What is one piece of advice that you'd like to share for future comic writers or up-and-coming artists that are trying to just start?
In general, right? Well, coming from a production background and being the art director who hires artists, I would say that they
Email
have...
you.
No, don't. No, I don't do that anymore. I do bags now. No, but deadlines.
Okay.
If I have to say anything, I don't really, talent doesn't, it matters a lot,
matters,
but as
yeah.
an art director and someone who has to put stuff together, I would rather work with someone who gets their work to me on time. Because that's very important, and that's a big issue with a lot of artists. I mean, I can probably count less than
Borrow mine too.
yeah, no, I probably don't need to. of artists who are actually right on the money when it
Wow.
comes to deadlines.
Deadlines.
And Ramon, how about you?
Well, in this day and age, it's really about building an audience. So that means collecting emails, building your followers on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. But the bigger your audience, the more people you can promote your projects to, and the more likely a publisher will publish you because you already have an audience.
Yes. Great. Okay, so thank you again, Ramon and Maria. You may learn more about Ramon by visiting www.ramongil.com and more about Maria at www.4mnfunction.com. Maraming salamat to our Makilala TV team, Jen and Cristina, and of course to all of you, our viewers, for your continued support.